I'm Tara.
I'm Ryan.
We love Disney movies.
So we decided to watch them all, from Snow White
to Frozen 2 and beyond. Each episode will watch a different Walt Disney Animated Studios film and tell you all about it.
Did we like it? Does it hold up? Who's our favorite hero?
Or villain.
We'll give you history and fun facts about each movie.
And sometimes we'll invite our friends to watch along with us.
So put on your tiara
or your evil crown
and join us on our adventure.
This is Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another Tara and Ryan Princess Diaries MiniTale, where we do our best to talk about a movie in under 45 minutes, and today we are doing 2014's Maleficent.
And we, like 101 Dalmatians, this may go right to the 45-minute mark.
Yeah, we've got thoughts.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and start by reading the synopsis?
So it came out in 2014. I
Yes.
think you may have said that. And the synopsis here from IMDb is: a vengeful fairy is driven to curse an infant princess, only to discover that the child may be the one person who can restore peace to their troubled land. And that's it. It's very vague, but...
Well, the first thing we want to say is, this is the first one that it feels like there's, I don't want to say twists, but like spoilers with Dumbo. Dumbo did a lot of stuff outside of Dumbo, but it was just so bonkers, cuckoo bananas.
Yeah, we didn't feel like we were spoiling anything for you.
Right.
However, with this, the story is flipped in a couple places, and the iconic ending that most people know is different. So we wanted to give a disclaimer: if you are interested in watching this movie and you haven't seen it yet, and you don't want spoilers, you want to skip this episode.
But before we get to that, just real quick, pretty good?
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, I have some things I really loved about it. I have some things I really didn't like about it. And we're going to go into details on that shortly here. I will say, if you're a fan of Maleficent, I think there are moments where Angelina Jolie really captures her. Mm-hmm. And her performance, I think it goes kind of back and forth a little bit.
I thought she was pretty... Anytime she felt not great, it felt to me like it was the story or the direction or something else, but she was pretty solid all the way through. And so one of the things I discussed with you while we were watching this, she's apparently a big fan of this character. She was executive producer on this movie, and she had a lot of things she wanted to do to make sure that she did a good job with this character. We felt a very similar... We talked a little bit about this with 101 Dalmatians, where Glenn Close, they came in and gave her new lines, and she was like, this isn't Cruella lines. Cruella didn't say this. And they were like, well, we're doing something different. There was a very similar story here, where they... When
she puts the curse on the princess.
Yes, where they apparently had different lines written, and she's like, no, I'd like for these to all be...
And some of the lines were new, but then it weaved in, like, when she puts the curse is very, like, word for word, for the most part.
There were scenes in this movie where she did stuff, and I was like, yes, like, you get really into her performance.
You do, yeah. And I will say, I think she captured it well, but yeah, the story is very different. And there, like I said, there's a lot to it. So just... that's kind of our overview, but this is where I would stop listening if you don't want spoilers and you do want to see this movie.
Okay, now that those people are gone, guys, this movie stunk. No, I'm just kidding. There were some interesting choices, and there were some bad choices. Yeah,
and what I will say, too, is I was super pumped for this movie because, as you all know, I'm a huge Maleficent fan. However, it came out, and a lot of close friends of mine whose opinions I value, as well as just reading things about it, all pretty much told me, like, it's not really worth it to go see it. So
you said it was a 54 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, and so that's why I never saw it personally, even though I was a big Maleficent fan. I was super pumped for it, and then I kind of was deflated. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I won't spend money to see it in the theater. And then I just never got around to seeing it. So that's kind of the background for me. And at that point, Ryan and I were together, so it was probably the same thing.
I mean... I
don't know that you ever had an interest in seeing it to begin with.
My Disney love has, like, blossomed in this last year. I think a lot of it has to do with us being in quarantine. And I think in general, I'm looking backwards to things that are a little more familiar.
Yeah.
Or I know a little bit about, like, there's also not a whole lot of new stuff coming out. But it doing this podcast has made me appreciate a lot of that stuff. I know you love Maleficent, and I was like, oh, maybe we should go see it, but I also wasn't like dying to see it.
Yeah.
I'm glad we saw it after this. It was a particularly dark and gloomy day, so I suggested let's do this.
So basically, again, we're not going to go beat for beat, but there are certain things that, like, chronologically I wrote down in my notes. So some of the very, like, different, like, comparisons from the Disney version, the animated version, to this. And again, this is Maleficent's story, not Sleeping Beauty's story. However, it is still very focused around Aurora. Because
Sleeping Beauty, like, possibly, like, if I could, like, do the top 3 characters in this, it was Maleficent, her crow sidekick Diavel,
or Devil, I think,
and then Sleeping Aurora. Aurora was. It takes her a while to appear and do something in this movie, and when she does, she's very, very pleasing to Aurora. She's pleasant. She's fine. She's more than fine. I like her.
She's fine. Yeah, I mean,
I liked her.
But one of the first big differences is it feels like we're in Scotland or Ireland or somewhere like that versus France. And it is 2 very separate kingdoms. There is a human kingdom and there is a magical, like, Moors kingdom.
Filled with, like, little goblin-y thing, like, weird creatures.
And what I will say is I liked the world building there, and it was interesting to see a lot of the creatures, and you see them in a couple different ways. So we meet Maleficent as a child, and there's this narrator, and through the whole story, this is one of the first big spoilers, is the narrator, the way it's narrated, it almost feels like it's a version of Maleficent being the narrator.
I thought it was Angelina Jolie.
And then it is revealed at the very end that it is Aurora who is the narrator of the whole story.
As an adult.
As an adult.
An older woman, it sounds like.
Yeah. So,
Can I say one thing about the little creatures that were in the moor? So it's like the kingdom and the moor.
Yeah, and the moor, it's fairies and goblins and other creatures that maybe don't have a definitive name that we know, but that they've created in this world.
I was hoping beyond hopes that these little weird creatures, when she became evil, was going to, like,
kind of turn into her minions
her
a little
goons,
bit. Yeah, that would have been
not in this movie, and it's very upsetting.
That would have been an easy transition. I feel like with some of those characters.
They look like little, like some of them, like, one of them wears, like, a mushroom hat. The other one, like, they throw mud at each other.
Yeah, you're right. That would have been easy to do.
And we see a young Maleficent who has these big, giant hawk condor looking wings.
Yeah, and we're introduced to the 3 fairies, the red, blue, and green fairies, whose names are completely different, and I don't remember them, and I don't care to remember them because they were the worst characters in the movie.
Tara?
Like, I have so much hate for these 3 fairies. I think, why mess with something that worked? Like, at least keep their names. But also, like, they were just, I hate to use the term idiot, but they were fools. They were fools, I guess, is a kinder word than idiot, but they just, like, they didn't, the only thing that they did was move Aurora to the woods, to the forest.
Yes.
But we find out that Maleficent really cares for her and takes care of her because she knows these 3 fairies are incompetent.
This movie would have benefited, for all the changes it made, it would have benefited if they would have cut those characters out.
Either cut them out or just had them morph them into one, so it was one person taking care of Aurora, or keep them exactly how they were in the movie. Not using the same lines, but the same personalities, the same, like...
Well, or that was the problem. Like, I don't like to advocate for let's just do the same thing, but what they had was so bad, and if the other option was keep them the same, then yes, I agree with you.
Yes,
but
or
the problem
completely change it.
They didn't have 3 distinct personalities.
No, they were all flighty and ditzy, but just
it was less
selfish,
less flighty, and very flighty were the other 2.
Yeah, and very selfish. Like, because they make that line at the end: "We gave away the best years of our life to care for this child." Yeah. And, like, you didn't care for her. At one point, Aurora says they accidentally fed me spiders. Like, these 3 fairies are, I could go on for a long time about them.
But I want to go on about one more thing with them. Two things real quick, because one of them was they took King Stefan and they made him the villain in this movie.
And I really liked that.
And that was good.
That was an interesting switch.
I feel like if they would have made these 3 characters more villainous, like maybe like Lady Tremaine and the stepsisters, or something like that, where, like, or something that would have been more interesting. Instead, they just made him annoying and hard to watch.
Yeah, and what they thought, I guess, fairies should act like, which I don't agree with either, but...
Now, let me ask you this, because originally there were 3 other people they were going to cast in that role. 3 famous Disney sis who played 3...
The Sanderson sisters?
Yes, that was knocked around at one point that it was going to be the Divine Miss M.
I don't know that I would have liked that, because I wouldn't want them to write them like...
Yes.
The Sanderson sisters.
Apparently it was just very quickly floated, but...
But basically, boy Stefan is kind of like Wart. He's just, like, he's not from a nobility. He's just, like, he aspires to be the king. He aspires to have the kingdom. But we find out he's not of noble birth, I guess. Yeah. And so he is always very curious, and he goes into the moors and steals a crystal, and that's how him and Maleficent meet, and they find out that neither one of them have parents, and, we find out something very early on. He has an iron ring, and he goes to touch her, and it hurts her, and she gets... she heals pretty quickly, but iron is kind of like her kryptonite, essentially.
Yeah, and that's like a Irish folklore with fae folks, so I think that's where that came from.
And so they talk about how they have this friendship, and friendship turns into love, and then when Maleficent is 16, they kiss, and it's true love's kiss. And that's kind of where we're first introduced to that, which for all of us who know the story of Sleeping Beauty, that's the whole thing with the curse when Sleeping Beauty's 16. And so then we see Maleficent as an adult, and she's the protector of the moors. She's got these great wings, and she can fly around. And it seems like she's very a commanding presence to when there's trouble, she's able to call on all of the creatures of the moor to help her.
Because the current king wants to take over the magic, or he's
the mysterious moors and the magical creatures is what he calls them. So he basically goes to war with the moors.
And she kicks butt flying around, knocking everyone over.
Yeah, and that's a pretty cool scene. And then Stefan comes back all sweet to warn her, and you don't feel real great about it, because you're like, is he really warning her?
Because he's the king's like
squire.
Yeah, and he says,
and the king's on his deathbed.
Yes, and he's saying to all the lords, whoever brings me this beast, whoever kills this beast I will name my successor. And so Stefan shows up under the auspice that he is there to warn Maleficent.
That this is what's about to happen.
Tara, apparently being untrusting of men since minute 1, was like, he's poisoning her. Like, he gives her something to drink.
Well, at first I thought he was going to kill her before he takes the knife out. I was like, oh no, he's going to try to kill her. And what happens is he gives her a drink, and I'm like, oh, that's poison. There's no way. And she doesn't realize it's poison, but she falls asleep on his shoulder, and he takes out the knife, and he can't do it. And so then he has an iron chain with him, not really sure why, but he has an iron chain with him, and he takes her wings, which is like a really terrible, when she wakes up and like cries out in pain, like I really felt like that feeling of agony of like her, not only part of her body, but like what she loves to do most has been taken from her. And so he brings the wings to the king, and he becomes king. And so this is where she starts to become what we know of as Maleficent. She has a different look before this. But as she stands up, she takes a stick, and that's created into her staff. And essentially it's a cane, because she's trying to walk without these wings. And the crow like comes to befriend her at first.
Well, no. Well, yeah.
Yeah, she like shoos him away.
Well, she goes into, there's this whole scene where she goes into like a destroyed castle.
Yeah, it's like the ruins.
But it looks like her ruins from the movie.
But she doesn't stay there, which is weird.
Yeah, which is a weird
They
thing.
could have just cut that, honestly, because I thought that was where she was going to be.
Yeah.
And we don't go back there at all. I guess it's just a nod to the original, but why do it if you're not going to do anything with it?
So then...
Because...
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, I was going to let you go, because then she goes into the moors, and you see things don't necessarily die, but their bright light kind of goes out. Like, everything gets dark.
Before that, she finds Diavel.
Yes, and shoos him away at first.
Shoos him away, well, assuming that's still him. And then she sees he's been captured by a farmer, which is the weirdest thing I've ever seen of, like, they throw a net over a crow, and these 2 dogs, like, bark. It's like, the biggest thing to get a crow, like... You just shoot a crow. Like, that's what you do. You don't capture it.
Yeah.
And she turns him into a man. And I really like this character. This actor was a lot of fun.
And I like that the idea is you're going to be my wings. So I'm going to turn you into a bird when I need you to fly out there and see things. And then, I'll change you into a man when I need to talk to you about
when I need to get some exposition out there and we need to discuss that stuff. That's pretty much why they made him that character for a couple of reasons.
And the one thing I wrote here is during this whole scene when the crow first tries to befriend her, it fades and goes just to her green eyes. And that was very reminiscent of that happens in the animated version as well. And so the other thing that is noticeable here is whenever she's playful with magic and when she's not being cruel or trying to harm people, but she's just trying to mess with people or do something good with magic, it's gold. But the first time we really see it green is when she is angry and she's like wanting vengeance. Mm-hmm. And you see that with the spell, with the curse, and we're going to get there in a minute, but like that's where all the green magic is. So it's the hate in her heart, that hatefulness is what's driving that kind of magic. So it's a different color. And I don't know if you noticed, but Devil, or I don't know that either one of us are saying his name right, but the crow calls her mistress a couple times because she's the mistress of evil. So I found, I liked, there were some nods like that I did appreciate, like certain lines that they kept the same or certain ways things were done. So that was something I wanted to mention. And then we cut to the big celebration, and this feels like the opening of the Disney story. Yeah. It's the christening of baby Aurora. Stefan, has had a child, and we see all these women at the spindles as the celebration comes up, and they're saying it's a girl, and then Ryan made the same joke that he made in the animated version, which is their industry's about to go under, and they don't even know it, because this is before the spell. So that all feels very much like the Disney story. But then the trio of fairies, one gives her beauty and the other one gives her, she'll always be happy. Like you'll never be blue because she's the color blue.
Yeah, every time they show up, they feel shoehorned in. They feel not like, and they're there to bring peace between the kingdoms, because the whole point of this thing up to this point is we don't like anything from the Moors, and then everyone's like,
and then they just accept these three. At first, King Stefan, I think, is a little wary because he knows he cut the wings off Maleficent, and here's some magical creatures. I think that's why he's wary of them, but no one else is.
I think you're adding that. I think you're trying to find purpose where there really wasn't much thought.
The other thing is don't even get me started on those stupid blue butterflies that follow that blue fairy around.
Thistlewit, Flutie, and Knobsnot.
I didn't commit their names to memory because they were terrible. But those butterflies fly around her when they become humans, when they're caring for her, and they look like moths. They just look like she needs a bath.
She looks like Pigpen.
Yes, I was just gonna say Pigpen with the dust. So the one thing we said here is when Maleficent shows up at the christening, it's just her shadow. It's just her silhouette. And that is very cool because this is, that's the other thing we should say too. Her throne is in the moors. So going back to how those ruins never turn into anything. Her throne's in the moors. So we see her, a little bit of that iconic Maleficent look, a little bit, but then you really see it when she's in the castle.
She knocks it out of the park in this whole scene.
Yeah.
And especially since this is had to be compared to the original, she does such a good job here.
She does. I really like her performance here.
Let's stomp down for a second and spend the next 20 minutes talking about Angelina Jolie, the co-stars of this movie, her cheekbones.
Oh my gosh. What I will say is also the costume design, the makeup for her specifically, the way that they have shaded her cheekbones, and the way that her fairy ears are meant to be under those horns, and the lines are almost exact. There are moments where I would have Ryan pause it just so I could admire the lighting, the way her makeup looked, and the way the costume looked. There were a lot of moments like that I was a lot of thought was put into this, and I did appreciate that.
The set design and the visuals in this are really good. The director came from the visual effects background.
And I will say the world of the Moors we enjoyed for the most part.
Yeah, I think you could tell that when in the special effects shots, and also some of the shots of Maleficent, we'll go into this spends a lot of the movie just kind of hanging out and watching Aurora.
Peering and
some of those shots were so amateurish. It just felt like it was just put on a tripod and then aimed at like just a couple trees.
Yeah.
And she was like behind
them. And then
them,
other ones were very beautifully done.
Yes.
Like there were some shots of her that I thought were really interesting and artistic, and then there were other ones that was like a throwaway shot.
This was a first-time director, and I thought he did a very good job for a first-time director, but I think there's a lot of spots where I went, oh, this is a first-time director.
The other thing I will say, too, that we didn't mention is there are these trees that are help be the protectors.
Tree people?
I guess, yeah.
Treeple?
And a dragon tree, too.
Like a worm? Beginning. It was a graboid. It was like going in the ground and stuff.
And what is cool about them, and this is back with the old king when they're in battle, is they come up out of the ground, and I really liked the thought behind those characters and how they fight and things like that.
And some of them come riding in on wild boars.
Yeah,
which really cool. And the wild boars had like moss on them.
And stuff, yeah. So there was a lot of thought with some of those additional characters. But basically what happens here is she's going to put her in a sleep. So Maleficent, I believe in the Disney version,
she's going to kill her. She's going to
die on her 16th birthday. She's going to put her into a deep sleep on her 16th birthday.
Because again, the point in the movie was one of the fairies helps get a loophole into the curse.
That's right, the loophole, and they cut that out here.
Because
Maleficent just puts her to sleep forever, and the king, Stefan, begs her. He gets down on his knees and basically begs her to not do it, and she goes, okay, fine. She'll have to be woken by true love's kiss. And what we find out is Maleficent does not believe in true love because the only person she has loved is Stefan, and he like brutally betrayed her. So there's that through that. And then she puts the thorns around the moors. So that's like the thorns around the castle. That's her way to protect the moors so they can't get in.
So this is where we get into the actual Sleeping Beauty, where it's basically the three dum-dum fairies take her out to the woods and like immediately start doing really dumb stuff. Like they turn into regular people and leave the baby outside.
Yeah, and then they're like, you're hiding. Where did you go? The baby is where you left the baby.
And it becomes this thing where Maleficent and Diaval are like, well, I guess we kind of have to take care of her.
Well, and the baby's crying, and all three of them are sleeping and not paying attention to the baby crying. And that's where she sends Diaval to, like, give her, like, a flower that's filled with liquid.
Because they haven't fed her.
Yeah, and then he rocks her with a crow's foot, which was a little, but fine.
There's another point where she's kind of, like, sat by the window, and Maleficent kind of looks in and is, like, trying to scare her, but she's laughing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of dumb but cute. Like,
yeah, well, and then that's where you mentioned that she actually scared real children.
Okay, so then there's a scene later where they lose the baby, and the baby wanders off into the woods and finds Maleficent. Yeah. That's Angelina Jolie's actual child, because that was the only child who wasn't and then she comes up to Maleficent and is like, hold me.
And yeah, Maleficent picks her up.
And is very kind of like, she keeps calling her Beastie or Little Beast
when she's a baby, and then Beastie is like the nickname. She uses the name Aurora once you realize she really cares for her.
Yeah.
But she still uses Beastie as a playful nickname in the end.
And that's the point of this, is you see kind of a couple different things going on. You see that the Maleficent is really taking care of her when the fairies can't. Maleficent is starting to
have feelings for
her. All the while, Stefan is going insane.
He's losing his mind. His wife the queen winds up dying, and he doesn't see her on her deathbed. Like, he's really spiraling.
He's talking to the wings that he's put in like a case.
And he's basically he's preparing for, I want you to instead of bringing her back on her 16th birthday, it's the day after her 16th birthday, for whatever reason, because he has this big master plan on how he's going to catch Maleficent, because he figures Maleficent will be back. So that's what's going on with him, and he knows iron hurts her, so he's getting all the iron workers. We don't see what they're making. We just know that he's like going kind of crazy, getting them to make a bunch of iron.
I think there's a point, later, there's a point where Aurora, like, wanders up to the border. Maleficent puts her to sleep, and there's a bunch of soldiers there, and they're all wearing iron. So I think he's, like, having them make iron.
Yeah, and then he takes it a little bit further where, like, he's making them wake up in the middle of the night, and you're finding out he's really preparing for battle here. We just don't exactly know what it's going to look like.
So this is the scene where she tells Diaval to, like, distract the soldiers, and she turns him into a wolf, but it's not exactly a wolf. It's a wolf with, like, a crow's beak and crow's feet. It also feels like that was a design choice by the VFX, because later Diablo's like, you changed me into a crow. Like, they never mention that he's this weird crow monster.
But he says, you changed me into a dog.
Yeah.
And he's, like, very put off, like, dogs chase crows. Like, why would you change me into a dog? She's like, it was a wolf. He was like, same difference or whatever. But even when she changed him into the horse has still...
He's a horse later.
Yeah, I like the details of keeping the crow a little bit. And even when he's a man...
loved it.
He's got, like, different scars and stuff
he's got
on his chest. And, but on his chest there's a scar, too. So that was like an interesting thing. What I will say is we then see a part. Maleficent tries to warn her of the evil of the world, and she tries to tell her what she's done. And then Aurora, we find out Aurora is like, oh, you're my fairy godmother, which I got a chuckle at that.
Yeah, Maleficent's like, what?
She's like, oh, I've always seen your shadow, your silhouette. Like, you've been with me since I can remember. Like, I always know you're there watching, and you're watching over me. You have to be my fairy godmother, which I don't know who told her that term, because she's literally living by herself. So I guess maybe they told her the story of Cinderella. I don't know. Well, they were like half talking to her, the three fairies. But anyway... so I like that she calls her fairy godmother. So they're getting this bond. They've got this bond, and she expresses she wants to live in the moors. Yeah. Eventually, Maleficent takes her to the moors, and she's so curious, and she's so kind to everyone. A little bit like Snow White and Cinderella, kind to all the creatures and all of these things. And so then when she takes her back home to bed, what we love is anytime Maleficent puts someone to sleep, a lot of times it's because she doesn't want to hear them talk anymore.
Yeah.
So she's like, no, like she was getting too lovey and excited about Maleficent, Aurora, and so she put her to sleep. And then she sends her like back into her bed, and this is where she tries to revoke the curse. And we find out that she can't revoke the curse. And what I will say here is I don't want to say that this felt forced, and I know like they had to progress the movie, but I don't feel at that point that she had the love for her that she has a little bit later on, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Well, I think they had to show that, like, it doesn't, like, she can't just turn it off.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
It seemed like the best time to do that.
And again, I wrote, where are the fairies? Because, like, she's gone all day. They're not worried about her. She's, like, gets back in her bed in the middle of the night. But then we meet Prince Philip, and he's just introduced as Philip. He never says he's a prince.
Right.
On his horse. And he surprises her. Which is
kind of how it is in the...
Yeah. In the animated version. He surprises her. She's not singing or anything. And they meet, and then they lock eyes, and you can see that they're kind of into one another. And she's asking if he'll come back to the forest. And he says, yes, I'm looking for the castle. I got turned around, blah, blah, blah. She basically points him in the right direction of the castle. And then goes into the house. And this is where Diaval says, oh, well, that will fix it. It's true love. Like, we'll just get them together. And that's when we find out Maleficent really doesn't believe in true love. So when she gets back to the cottage with the fairies, she shares that she's going to go live in the moors. And they're basically, we don't hear what they say, but they basically tell her, we're taking you back to your father.
They say that, and she goes, my like, father.
You told me my parents were dead. And then she runs away on a horse.
Does she right?
Isn't it a horse? I think
she
shows up on a horse. Oh, maybe she doesn't. I don't remember. But anyway, she shows up at the gates of the castle on her actual 16th birthday.
No. First, she goes to Maleficent and confirms everything.
And this is one confronts of the shots, her. That's
This is one of the shots that felt like it was in a tiny, tiny soundstage.
Yeah, and she confronts her because they've told her the curse, and she's like, "You're the evil of the world."
Yeah,
that you were warning me about.
So she runs off to her father. And her father is, like, not at all warm. He's like, she's here too early, lock her away.
Yeah, go lock her away. And so she gets sent away and locked in a room.
Maleficent goes, goes to find Prince Philip. And then, again, and he's just floating behind her.
Sleep. Yeah.
Oh, no, they ride back on the horses because she goes, I need a horse.
Yes, and then he's changed into a horse. But what I wrote here is, this is where the story is really flipped. Instead of her capturing Prince Philip so he doesn't give her the kiss, she's captured Philip so he will give her the kiss. So it's a very different switch. And the same thing with the thorns. For the Moors, they're to protect the Moors and keep others out, not necessarily to hurt Philip. And then we find out that there are iron thorns throughout the castle that Stefan has done, so it's kind of reversed.
She
just
were right
walks
when she goes
through them
slowly.
She just slowly walks through them with Philip floating behind her.
Yeah, I feel like he would have been like stab as he's flipping around. There's a bit I wanted to point out near the end where when they reveal that Aurora was the narrator, she's like, so this might not have been the way you'd heard it. And I wish they would have pushed that a little more, because I do feel like they do a good job of like, this feels like you could warp this story into what the original Disney one was. Like, it's like the story is typically told by the winners, and if like there was a point near the end where we'll get to that in a bit, but
so things change and with some things and the way that they've switched some of the storylines, but then basically she brings Philip, and she's like in the shadows, and the three dum-dums are like so excited that he's a prince, so they bring her in. That
was one thing I think, like, the character of Maleficent wouldn't be in the shadows that much. She'd be like, get out of my way. And she'd be like, I'm gonna do
she's
this.
Very timid in the castle.
And I don't think that's bad. Like, I don't think that's evil of her to be that way. I think she could have still been, we're presenting her more as a hero, and still been like, shut up, dum-dums, and they like put them in a box again, and she's like, okay, you kiss him.
I agree. Yeah. But so they try to get her to kiss him, and the one thing that we did like is he's like, well, I just met her.
Yeah,
like,
there's a little like...
He is a little like, this is weird, she's asleep, so I appreciated that. But he kisses her, nothing happens, and they're like irate at him, and it's like, again, throwaway. They don't need to be there.
They run out with the prince, and then I think
to go look for someone
another
else
prince, because they're useless. And then Maleficent is kind of hiding in the background. You kept saying you liked the way she...
I did like the way she was peering through like the gold.
What is that called?
Like a lattice or something. It's
but no,
like a dressing screen.
Thank you, a dressing screen.
Then we find out that this is the really big spoiler. Where True Love's kiss is the love Maleficent has for her, which I like that. It's different.
Cheesy, but it's handled very well. Where I went, oh, because there's a part where Aurora meets Diaval.
Yeah,
and he's
I was
very
like, is he
sweet
gonna
on
be
her.
The True Love's kiss, and I was like, I don't know about that.
I think he's very sweet on her, because there were parts when she was growing up where she's like, oh, pretty bird, and like, I think he was supposed to be conveying like, you were very nice to me. I like you.
You were a caretaker. Like, I was your caretaker, but you also were really nice to me, and Maleficent isn't always great to me.
Diaval's very proud to be a crow, so I would see him if she was like, but I love you, Diaval. Be like, oh, you're a disgusting human. Like, I think they're going to be that.
So, there is that scene, and Maleficent is very emotional, and, I buy that there.
She says, I'm going to do everything I can to protect you while you're asleep, and I will try and find a way to switch this. I'm so sorry. She kisses her on the head. And it wakes her up. And that was the twist that I really enjoyed in this.
Yeah, and so then we get to, because we're like, well, there's still a chunk of time left. Like, there's going to have to be a battle. So I called it the Battle Royale, but...
That's incorrect. So what happens is, a Battle Royale is when you have all the contestants in one thing, and then they keep throwing them out. What this was more of a lumberjack match, because all of the knights were around them with their shields,
and
keeping them in the ring.
And I kind of skipped. What we find out is... some of the iron he has made besides the thorns is an iron net. So that's kind of how they first capture Maleficent, is this iron net. And then she turns Diaval into the dragon. And so that's when we get to see the dragon. And which it is pretty bad. Can I say bad?
I mean, I'll have to bleep it out, but you can say it.
He's a pretty bad dragon.
I thought you were kind of like, because it's not Maleficent that turns into a dragon, so it takes that power away from her. But eventually she does kick butt here in a little bit. But like, I loved Diaval turning into a dragon, because it felt like it was
they
earned.
They kind of set it up.
They set it up, and he was such a good character that I was like, when they turn, I was very excited.
And so he helps her, and then that's where this lumberjack match where it's all of the guards with these iron shields, and then King Stefan is in iron with this like iron spiked whip, I guess. And so then they start fighting, but then also Aurora, does she hear the wings, or
I think she runs. I think Maleficent tells her to run, so she's like looking to hide.
And she runs into the room where the wings are trapped in the case, but they're moving. They're alive.
Like they can tell that Maleficent is near.
They can sense Maleficent is close, and so she breaks it. And so when Maleficent gets her wings back, like all bets are off. Like things go down after that.
Also, at some point, Maleficent loses her robe. We noticed, and is just in this skin tight leather.
Yeah, which that's a little weird, and obviously it's because they're going to put her wings back on.
Yeah.
But I feel like they could have done something a little different there because it just looks a little weird. But
it looks like Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman a little bit.
Yes, a little bit. And then he gets the chain around her leg, and I love that she just drags him through the castle, out the window, and then she throws him down, and she's basically like, this is done. Like, we're done. And of course, because he's the villain at this point, he still goes after her, and he falls.
In traditional Disney villain fashion.
He falls not off a cliff, height. But from a great height, and he has, what Ryan said, and I agree, a Hans Gruber death.
Oh, yeah, they show him falling. And he's also got that Hans Gruber hair and a mustache and everything.
It was very similar. And so then basically, the next shot, like after all of that, is the sun rising on the castle.
Well, because you went...
And all is well.
No, you said there's no way anyone's going to believe she didn't kill him.
Yes.
And so that's when I thought, we're talking about like the winners in history write the history books.
Yeah.
I thought that was going to be like, and that's why she's a bad guy in the stories.
Is because
they saw her and they're like, it's like I always say with, which will, boy, get ready for me to talk about this a lot in the Beauty and the Beast episode, where it's like the story that came out of that should have been the town folks going like, that horrible monster killed our hero.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it feels like. It's like...
Yeah, and I think they could have played that up a little bit more, but they didn't. They just went to the happy ending with the sunrise, and then the kingdoms are unified, and they make Aurora the Queen of the Moors. And that's where we
Is she the Queen of the Moors? Like,
that's what I wrote down, yeah. They crown her the queen, and I thought they said it was of the Moors. But I guess if the kingdoms are unified, maybe she's the queen of both? I don't know.
Which is, okay, so they just gave over the crown and everything to this girl? Like, I don't believe that kingdom doing that.
Yeah, I don't know.
It felt very...
Maleficent crowned her, which is why I thought she was the queen of the Moors, because she's being crowned in the Moors. But they say that the kingdoms are unified. They specifically say that line.
But I don't see the human kingdom agreeing to that.
Yes, I agree with you.
Because they were like, oh, Maleficent. Like,
well, that and they watched Aurora, like, help Maleficent.
Yeah, like,
so,
they're not gonna, unless you want some real Game of Thrones, like, well, we have to make her queen because she's...
Yeah, so that's where we also find out that Aurora, is the narrator, and that's kind of just how it ends. And then I made another note about how I didn't like the three fairies. I, like, really didn't like them. But that's pretty much it.
Then we have the Lana Del Rey, very haunting
version.
Like,
creepy.
I liked this more than I thought I was going to.
I would agree with that. I boycotted it for a bit. So I tried to go in with an open mind, and I did like it more than I thought I was going to. And I think you can tell the parts that I liked, I was excited about talking about, and the parts I didn't like, I really didn't like. I think there was a good story there, and I think it wasn't executed. Like, I think they could have gone further with the story than they did. They could have made a couple changes.
Every time that I got bored or didn't like it, it was because I felt that it was hamstrung. I don't know if that's the exact right term. By they were beholden to the original story.
Yes, and they changed it enough that they really weren't beholden to the original story, right?
Well, I think, like, we spent a lot of time when Aurora's growing up with Maleficent just sitting around watching her.
Yeah, doing nothing. And you could see that Angelina Jolie embraced that character, so it would have been nice to see more of that character. Mm-hmm. And that's where I will say flipping the story and making her the hero in the end because she saves Aurora. I don't know. I think that's where sometimes the lines get blurred, I guess. Do you know what I mean? Like, making her the hero, I feel like we saw her evil, but not as much as I would have liked to see. You know what I mean? That's where it kind of clashes for me. I like the idea that they changed the story. Yeah. I just don't think it meshed well, if that makes sense.
I felt like we just saw her have one moment of evilness and then...
And we really liked that moment. Yeah. We liked that moment of the curse. We liked that moment when she was, like, really furious in the moors, when she realizes she doesn't have her wings, and we see, like, the green coming from the sky.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen her play with being getting out of being a villain more. I mean, like, the villainy was really just a big blip in the road.
And that's what I would say about how, like, it didn't feel natural when she wanted to re-invoke the curse. Mm-hmm. It felt like that's where they wanted the story to go, so they flipped her like
really
personality
early.
And her character, and I don't know, with all that hate and vengeance in her heart, that she would have necessarily warmed up to her. I don't know. That's where I'm kind of torn with it.
It felt like the warming up took a lot of place off screen while Aurora was growing up.
And the other thing is too is you want to see Maleficent
be Maleficent
and kick butt. I'm gonna trying to keep it PG here.
Well, not even kick butt, just be menacing.
Be that intense person.
And like I said,
there are moments of that.
Yeah, I think she could have been a hero. At the end, she's just a good guy. She's not a menace. You can be a menacing anti-hero. Yeah. Like, I think there's a version of this that she could have been a little worse.
And I like that Stefan was the villain. I liked that twist.
Yes.
I thought that was done well. I just think they let Maleficent, the character, down in a movie that's supposed to be focused on Maleficent.
And that's interesting. I'm pretty interested to see the next one, the new one.
Yeah, because I was also
because they have
where
nothing
do
to hold them. Exactly. Well, they can go anywhere
they want. Yeah, because they ended it with like a happily ever after ending.
But they're done. I'm saying they're done with the source material.
I see what you mean.
They can do what they don't have to fall back on any of that. They've established these characters. Yeah. And they can go anywhere they want from there. I thought Angelina Jolie did a really good job with what she had, which was not the best story, which was not the best director. But I thought she was great. I love Diavol. I love him.
And the costume design, I really enjoyed a lot. I enjoyed a lot of her looks. And I kept saying to Ryan, I was like, if people want to cosplay as this Maleficent, why do the black? Because she has such interesting choices. She's got like these snake skin horns at one point that are really cool. She's got like this bone and feathered collar at one point. And I'm like, if you're going to cosplay as this Maleficent, you need to like do those looks. Like, save the traditional look for the Disney animated Maleficent. She has like a lot of really good costumes in this.
We just got a few more minutes left. Do you like we've watched about 4 of these now? Yeah.
It was fine. I don't know that I would tell somebody, "Oh my gosh, you have to go out and watch it." What I would say is, if you're a fan of Sleeping Beauty, if you're a fan of Maleficent, it's an interesting take on the story. Yeah. You might want to check it out. But I wouldn't recommend it.
Let's talk real quick about like if a kid wanted to see it. I think it's all right. There's not a lot of blood and guts. There's some.
I think she is really intense in certain parts that I guess you.
I wouldn't do a younger kid. I think it's
I
PG-13, so
couldn't remember.
I think you could probably let a couple kids like 10 and up maybe watch it and they'd be fine. But
it's PG.
Oh, it's only PG.
Yeah.
Okay, I could see that. It's pretty intense PG.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like,
but I think saying like 10 and up is probably.
Yeah,
I don't know what the number is for PG specifically.
I don't either.
All right. Do you got anything else you want to add about this other than those fairies were awful?
Those fairies were so bad, and Ryan looked it up, and I was like, oh gosh, I really hope they're not in the second one. And Ryan looked it up while we were watching it, and he had bad news for me. They are in the second one, so I'll be really curious to see if they've developed their characters, because they didn't develop them at all in this one.
I'm not interested to see that at all. I hope the first scene is like they're flying around and then a giant fly swatter gets them.
I hope they get rid of those stupid little butterflies that follow that one around. But yeah, that's it. I mean, I hope you enjoyed us talking about it. I think there were a lot of positives and negatives with this one. So, and definitely one, again, if you're a fan of it, you haven't seen it, but a fan of that story, it is an interesting twist on it. So I'll give it that.
Yeah, guys. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks for listening to Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
If you want to tell us your favorite Disney villain and why it's Gaston, send us an email at trprincessdiaries@gmail.com.
Or you can send a tweet about how great Maleficent is to @TRPDiaries.
Check out our Facebook group by searching for Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries are available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, and many more.
Wherever you hear us, please be our knight in shining armor and give us a 5-star review.
Thanks again, and until next time, remember to always live happily ever after.